For many years now, a chap named Martin Krzywinski has been on my radar. Each year on Pi Day, March 14, he releases stunning artworks and visualizations celebrating the famous constant. I was looking forward to seeing what he'd do this year. But you know what? Martin's thrown in a bit of a curveball. For 2022, instead of his typical visualizations, he's teamed up with a composer named Gregory Coles to create an album of 6 pieces of music, each based on pi in a different way. The collection is called 314, of course, and I'm speaking today to both Martin and Greg about all 6 tracks.
Right. My name is Martin Krzywinski. I work and live in Vancouver, Canada at Canada's Michael Smith Genome Sciences Centre. I research data visualization. I do quite a lot of science communication. I teach people how to be good explainers of science visually. And as part of that, I make quite a lot of art that is at the intersection of science and art and explanation and communication. Sometimes the art is frivolous and fun to look at. Sometimes it's about communicating complicated things. And every year I task myself with making some kind of art based on the digits of pi.
Many people, including myself, have been awaiting what visual treat you may unleash on Pi Day. But you've done something different this year. Can you explain what you've done this year and perhaps how it leads into the chap sitting next to you?
Oh, Greg, of course. So this year is quite a bit different. It's very different. And I've been thinking about how to combine music and how to turn digits, how to turn math, how to turn any concept, not just into visual things, which I kind of know how to do and I've been doing it, but doing it turning it into music. And obviously data sonification and doing this process is not new, and lots of people have done it, but I wanted to do it in a emotional way. All of the visualizations I do have a very strong component of my love of math and my interpretation as a human being of the digits and the experience I have with them. And I wanted the music to reflect it. But I don't have enough music training to do such a thing in a good, deep, creative way. And if I did something like that and you asked me, why did you do this? I would say, well, that's the only thing I could figure out in 2 weeks of reading Wikipedia pages on music composition, which would be very unsatisfying. And so when I met Greg, who's a conservatory trained composer, I thought I need to persuade him to help me create this thing that I've been thinking about, which is how do we express emotionally, musically, and in a smart and deep way what we think of when we see digits, when we see math. How do we take a story of pi within pi and turn it into a musical phrase, a composition, a feeling? So we've been really lucky to meet each other and to do this and to have an opportunity to come up with something.
So like Martin just mentioned, I'm a classically trained, university trained composer. I'm from Perth in Western Australia, which is where I did all of my undergraduate studies. And I have I was playing bass in a lot of different bands, kind of taking life pretty easily, not too seriously. And I did that for about 10 years, touring across Australia and Europe and Canada. And then I decided it was probably time to take life a little more seriously. So I went and did a teaching degree. So for 10 years I was teaching high school music in Australia and also in the UK. For about 4 years, which I really loved.
What are you doing now, and how did you cross paths with Martin?
I've been in Vancouver for 4 years. I married a lovely Canadian lass, and here I am. I've kind of revisited my composition roots, so I've been pursuing composition for film and television. I've just wrapped up doing the music and actually the whole audio post-production on this film. Yeah, so that's kind of where my energies are focused these days in composition. And when Martin came to me in December last year, with this project. It didn't take a lot of convincing. I can see his like passion and his energy, his excitement, enthusiasm for art and science, and yeah, those passions really match my own. So this was a very easy project to say yes to.
Greg, are you like much of a math guy before this? Like, are you a guy who has an interest or that, or was it sort of all kind of a big learning experience for you?
There was a lot of learning involved. A lot of the maths that I knew when I was kind of doing high school has kind of fallen away and been replaced by musical information. So some of the things that Martin was talking about were kind of familiar, but there were also things that I was just like, this is out of my comfort zone, which was great. Like, it was good to be pushed to think about music in a different way.
Musicians are forever telling me how mathematical music is, though. It is like kind of, it's an application of mathematics in an artistic way. Are you of that belief?
Yeah, that's what I tried to communicate to my students. It really is math made audible. Like telling that to students in the classroom, you could see a few light bulbs kind of switch on, and I tried to make the connection also with visual art as well. There's a lot of strong kind of parallels between the music that I've composed for this project, because a lot of the music is inspired by 20th century piano music. Yeah, I always used to draw those parallels between what was happening musically and visually in the 20th century.
What have you created? What is the thing that's about to be unleashed?
What is the thing? Well, it's a really interesting origin story, because Greg has a beautiful album that he composed entirely with his synthesizers. And when I listened to it, I thought, oh, this is I love synthesizers. I think what we're going to do is we're going to make this electronic, moody, dark thing that lasts forever and gets people really into the weeds. And Greg's like, no. I think we should do this for solo piano, so that we have this opportunity to have a performer, or at least people can perform it, so that there's a score and that people can sit down and play the music if they're advanced beginners and so on. And I thought, oh, this is such a much better idea. It gets more people into the loop. So what we've made is we've made 6 tracks, 6 stories, things about pi that perhaps are worth knowing, and map onto a different musical theme, feeling. As you'll play the tracks, you'll discover that each one has a slightly different personality. And the goal was a puzzle, was to match the personality and the inspiration for the piece to the story. Can we talk about something in pi that has a mathematical component to it, and then can we translate that mathematical component into music, and that component, that translation be audible, as Greg said. So we have 6 pieces, and each one tells a different story. They're about 2 or so minutes long. Some are shorter, and they explore the digits. And what we're delighted is we actually explore. Well, technically, we explore from the beginning of pi to the end of the 62.8 trillion digit calculation. We actually, in one of the tracks, play the last 3 known digits of pi. So we span the range.
Okay, you're dangerous talking about the last digits of pi. So I'm sure we'll come to that in a minute. But so it sounds to me like initially you had something in mind that was some kind of dense Blade Runner sci-fi awesome thing, and Greg wanted to do something that was a bit more accessible or practical or playable for the pianist in the street.
Definitely, that was a big concern of mine, making the music playable and accessible. And I kind of, as the project kind of progressed, I kind of realized there's a pedagogical aspect to this project, in that it's kind of introducing all of the pieces are kind of based on, they have like models from composers in the 20th century. So I realized there's this kind of, it's like a gateway, an introduction into this challenging listening.
What you're listening to now is a song on the album called The Wallace Product.
It's the only track that actually encodes the digits of pi by looking at a mathematical formula for the digits of pi. So for those listeners unfamiliar, the Wallace product is a series of multiplications of very simple fractions, 2 over 1 times 2 over 3 times 4 over 3 times 4 over 5 and so on. And this goes on forever. And if you multiply all the terms out, you get pi over 2. And so the Wallace product is interpreted as 2 polyrhythms. So the right hand interprets the fraction as, for example, a 4 over 3 polyrhythm where you have 3 pitches, but the accents are organized in groups of 4. And then the left hand, in a frustrating way, interprets it as a 3 over 4 polyrhythm. So it's 4 pitches and groups of 3 accents, and then they line up every 12 notes. And that is repeated. And as we play through the phrases, you hear these polyrhythms overlap and kind of weave in and out of one another as we go through the terms in the Wallace product up to 6 over 7.
So this piece is heavily based on like the minimalist work of like Steve Reich, Philip Glass. So this polyrhythmic nature of the mathematical material fits so well into that musical language of minimalist piano music.
How do we know when to stop composing a given track? And particularly when something is based on an infinite series of digits, essentially, or a sequence of product multiplications, we need to feel like, well, do we want the track to end on a high note? Do we want the listener to feel like, maybe this is dragging a little bit? Well, it should be, because the product is infinite. And so we kind of want to get to that point where you want to know, is this ever going to end? and then it ends. So, it is only 2 and a bit minutes long.
The second piece that we're going to hear is entitled 314. It's based on the opening digits of pi, which, as Martin kind of said, we're all familiar with. Everyone knows 3.1415. And then we get a bit lost. We get a bit confused. And that was kind of the trajectory, the narrative that we were trying to get across in this piece.
As the piece progresses, we've kind of, I've used a technique called serialism, which encodes various musical elements such as articulation, dynamics, pitch. It ascribes them a number, which we've matched the digit, obviously. And then, as the piece goes along, we've counted the occurrence of the notes and then used that frequency of occurrence to inform the serial kind of nature of the piece.
So there's a lot going on under the hood here. It's not just, a 3 is a C and a 1 is a A. Yeah. It's like you're really going deep.
Yeah. It starts at that point and then it really kind of blows out very quickly. And that's quite apparent as you listen to the piece. The model for this piece is the multiple serial works of Stockhausen and Boulez from the mid-20th century. And this is like hardcore intellectual academic music. It's not written to be easily listened to or easily digested. It's really impenetrable. And I've kind of towed the balance between making those ideas apparent, but also making something that's a little more accessible and listenable for, the modern audience, I guess.
Martin, encoding the classic digits of pi, starting with 314, is like, that's your bread and butter. That's where it really started for you with your visualizations. How do you feel about how this turns out when it sort of becomes musical and then gets more complicated?
I love it. I've learned a ton from Greg, and Greg, if he's taught me, an infinite number of things, but one of the things he's made me very sensitive to is the articulation and so the dynamics of the music, and I've listened to the tracks that your listeners will be listening to. They're meaty realizations. They're excellently produced, but they're not a human sitting at a piano. And so one of the challenges of these kinds of computer-generated scores is how do we incorporate that variation in volume, that slight difference in volume from one note to the next that a pianist would play. And I love that dimension, and that's what you hear in the Wallace Product when you've heard the accents popping in and out and hearing the polyrhythms, and in this piece too. And actually, at the very limit, the way we've encoded the digits is we've mapped them onto the Cs of the piano, but two Cs are not playable. So C0 is not on the piano and C9 is not on the piano. So these are interpreted as rests. So in this encoding, for this track and for others, there will be some notes that fall outside of the register of the instrument, and therefore you hear silence because the pianist is at a loss.
Is there a reason that you've generated the music electronically in this way and haven't done a recording of Greg sitting at a piano or something?
Unfortunately, my piano skills aren't up to performing these pieces.
Right.
And we just kind of ran out of time to organize the performance. That would have been really fantastic, and we may still do that in the future. But in the interest of time, we just had to get it done. So we did.
I can definitely see a recital coming at some point in the future.
Indeed.
I would love that. I've started learning the piano, and in 15 years, I might be ready to play the first piece.
What track should we talk about next?
So we just talked about the beginning of pi, and why don't we shuffle ahead all the way to the end of pi? I'm just going to say the last digits of pi. So the track 264 represents the last 2 minutes of the world record computation of the digits of pi. So this was done by the Davy group, and over the course of about 108 days, they computed 62.8 trillion digits of pi. So on average, this roughly corresponds to about 6.7 million digits per second. So the track has the mood of this relentless computation. Every second of the music, 6 notes are played, and these 6 notes are sampled from that 6.7 million digits of that were computed during that time. We have 62.8 trillion digits of pi, but the track represents the digits computed in the last 2 minutes of computation.
Okay.
And during each second of computation, you make 6.7 million digits. This is on average, because obviously you don't get digits out in a uniform rate. So what we do for every second of the music, we look at that 6.7 million digits that were computed in that second, and we play the second digit, then we play the mode, so the digit that appears most frequently in that second, twice. And then we play the penultimate and the last digit. Obviously, this is sampled from the actual list of digits. Then we move on to the next one. And wonderfully, if you look at the exact amount of time that it took for the world record computation to carry out, I'm going to read the numbers. It's 9,363,885 seconds, 0.591 seconds. So our track actually has a half a bar of music, so half a second, which is the 0.591 seconds, where we have 3 notes because we play 6 notes per second, so 0.591 seconds is 3 notes. And the track ends with us playing 264, and then it ends because we don't know what the next digit is.
This was pretty intense, to be honest, because I'm just literally just working with a stream of pitches, which doesn't make any traditional kind of musical sense. So the feeling of it for me was kind of like a jazz pianist just playing almost like a free jazz kind of solo. And so that inspired me to think about like left-hand accompaniment patterns that bebop pianists kind of developed in the 40s, which are kind of like sharp, jagged, accented chords that kind of outline the harmonic structure. That was kind of the basis for my input into the piece. The piece modulates, so it changes key every 10 bars. And because we've got 120 bars, there's 10 modulations through 10 different keys, which are all derived from a scale called the decatonic scale, which I was unfamiliar with until Martin shared a wiki page with me.
Was there much creative tension between the two of you when Martin would say, here's what the computer spits out, here are the numbers, here's the mathematics, and you saying, oh, but this might sound a bit prettier, is there a way to make this sound more musical? Like, was there much toing and froing, or was Martin just telling you, these are the constraints, churn it out?
That's a good question. I guess, because of my background and understanding of, listening to challenging music, I wasn't too phased by having, non-musical kind of pictures and information being thrown at me. It was more a matter of just kind of, working within those constraints, I guess.
But what work could you do once you decided the rules? Surely the numbers just completely dictated what the music would sound like. I mean, what could you bring to the party?
Yeah. That's a really good point, and something that it was kind of different for each piece, and this piece was one of the more constrained pieces for me. I had to accept what was in the right hand. The numbers were what they were. I couldn't change that. For me, I just had to create a harmonic structure and a harmonic movement in the left hand that kind of supported and supported this narrative of relentless computation.
And I guess deciding what the rules were was also part of the musicality of it.
Yeah, for sure. That was kind of Martin's kind of purview. He kind of came up with all the mathematical ideas, and then we kind of hashed it out which ones would work best with the musical ideas that I had in my head.
We needed a 10-note scale, but Greg came out with these two pentatonic interwoven scales, so that was a musical decision. And in this piece, I think more than all the other ones, you get to hear what the human brings to the loop in a very explicit way. Because the right hand plays that hard deterministic encoding, and the left hand brings all the creativity of a human brain to the piece. And while my tension around the creating of this album was, I need to hear the human in each of these pieces. I do not want this to be, plink, 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 just a bunch of notes played.
There's a little bit of plink, plink.
There's some plink, plink. but I want the plink, plink to be balanced, because it's humans composing music for humans. And I want everybody to feel like there's a human in the loop part of each step of the process. And the first time I listened to this track, I was absolutely floored by how, even though it's fundamentally based on this deterministic encoding, I wanted to listen to more of it. I felt like the piece was going somewhere, even though, of course, it's not going anywhere. The harmonization is masterful. I wanted this piece to be longer than it was, and I need to contact the group that computed this piece to have them compute more digits so we can listen to more of this piece. And wonderfully to add, I have a field recording of the hard disks that were used as part of the storage system for the computation of the 62 trillion digits, and we've included the spin-up sound of the hard disks at the beginning of the track, and then the spin-down sound at the end of the track to kind of indicate, the end of the computation.
This episode's been sponsored by G Research, a world-leading quantitative finance research firm based in Europe. They're always hiring clever people from around the world to tackle the biggest questions in finance, applying the latest in machine learning, big data, and top technology. G Research is always looking to hire top STEM talent, so if you're good with numbers, mathematics, computers, that kind of stuff, this could be the opportunity you've been waiting for. To find out more about them, go to gresearch.co.uk/Numberphile. G Research, create today, predict tomorrow. And now, another Pi-inspired track. This one is called NN.
NN is based out of the desire to create a sound that's similar to Eric Satie's music, like the Gnossienne and the Gymnopédies, which is very contemplative, slow, searching. He famously wrote a lot of his scores without tempo, without bar lines, without a time signature, and with vague instructions to the performer, such as play searchingly and so on. And I wanted this was a desire to have a Satie-like piece, and so we went out on a hunt for the story to back it up with. So this track was made in reverse, as opposed to starting with a story within pi. I wanted to fit pi into this story. So it's based on adjacent pairs of digits, so where digits appear twice in a row, because Satie's music has a kind of repetition. So this piece is quite lovely to listen to, and it's very calming. And it plays the double digits from a range of digits in pi where the melody is actually quite pretty if you play them based on these digits. So we mapped them to a 10-note scale, which is slightly different than the scale used for 2/6/4. And so, for example, around digits 3,884, we see a double 2. We look ahead, then there's a double 5 coming up, then there's a double 4, and so on. And so we play the 2/2, the 5/5, and the 4/4. And part of this project, there's a visual while there's not a lot of illustration in the score, although there are some graphics that are included. The Wallace sieve is what we used as the motif. The main visualization component of the project is a typographical engraving of the score. So we're taking tremendous care in making sure that it looks just like it's been smothered with love. So the other person who is involved in this project, Emma Beauxis-Aussalet, she's French, and she's included in the score the instructions to the player in both English and French, the way that Satie would write them in French, and they are kind of open-ended and for the performer. So absolutely, we are looking for someone to interpret this piece, as they wish, and I think it's very relaxing and calming, particularly in contrast with 2/6/4, which was perhaps a little frenetic.
So just so I understand, so it's almost as if you take the digits of pi and then strip away all the digits except where there's a pair,
Exactly.
a repetition. And
Exactly
that's what
right.
we play. Yeah,
exactly
okay.
right. So we play this, and then we group those. So I think that there is for the phrases of 8 pairs of digits, and then followed by, a group of 6 pairs of digits. So they're not next to each other necessarily. They're the next ones coming, and we repeat those phrases twice, and give that strong kind of Satie-esque feel to the music. And the last digit, which is a pair of, I believe it's a pair of A's.
B's.
Pair of B's. It's just so much to keep track of. Is only played once to avoid, to have kind of a hanging and suspension, a lack of resolution.
Yeah, I guess this was one piece where I kind of took a little bit of liberties with the data. Martin was kind of keen for me to kind of stick to the literal interpretation of the data as much as possible. But this is one where I was like, okay, if we're kind of aiming at this Satie-esque kind of sound, then we need to have repeating phrases. We can't just kind of be following like a random string of numbers. So I kind of pulled a little bit of weight in that one.
Oh, that's right, because there are cases where the digits not just repeat, but there's 3 of them in a row. And I'm like, Greg, we need to respect the fact that this appears 3 times. Maybe we play an 8th note into 16th. And Greg is like, no, we don't. and I, he's schooling me on the limits of how to force the story into how much forcing we can do in terms of incorporating the story in the music, and when the human says no, that would be a bad idea and everybody would lose if we did this, so we're not going to do it, and the piece will wind up being more beautiful. And so this is always a question of how much technical rigor, how much faithfulness do you keep to the underlying digits, and when do you say, no, I've decided to go my own way? And I think that conversation is actually much more interesting.
Yeah. One of the points that I made to Martin early on in the process was that the more highly organized music is, historically speaking, the less like music it sounds. So I was, as the composer involved in this project, I was very aware of kind of maintaining that balance of respecting the data and the numbers, but trying to inject, some musicality and humanness into the equation as well.
It's probably for the best, though, that it's the universe that decided what the actual digits of pi were and not Greg.
I'm happy with that.
Honestly, down at digit 3,884, I think the universe could make an exception in Greg's case and give him a digit. Nobody would know.
It probably doesn't matter at that point. Fair enough.
No one's counting.
This piece, it's called Null.
This was actually a reverse engineered piece as well. So I'm a huge fan of Morton Feldman's piano work. He was an American composer in the 1950s, 60s, working at the same time as composers in Europe like Boulez and Stockhausen, but with a very different approach. The Europeans were much more organized and mathematical and rigorous in their thinking, and Morton Feldman was much more interested in ideas of chance and philosophy. So those ideas are kind of permeating this piece. So this piece is it's the longest piece. It's about 4.5 minutes, and it is a very quiet piece. There's nothing louder than a mezzo piano. Just dynamically alone, that creates a mood and creates a feeling. And in terms of the encoding of the digits, I think I will leave that up to Martin.
It looks pretty complicated.
This is a really fun encoding. So it was reverse engineered in a sense. So we wanted to do something Feldman-like, and we were going to have these notes hanging in space. So the mood is notes suspended in space, and they just wash over you, and you're sitting there, and you don't know what's going to necessarily happen next. And instead of single notes, I think originally Greg thought maybe single notes would be a good idea. And me being the music noob, I think we should play some chords. I think we should play multiple notes at the same time. So okay, Greg, reluctantly said, okay, well, let's see if we could figure out a way to do this. And so sometimes chords are represented by harmonics. And we thought, well, how are we going to come up with the idea of harmonics? So it's called Null because the digits of pi are interpreted in the following way. We take where all the zeros are, and we use the zeros as the boundaries between groups of digits. So, for example, the first 0 happens at digit 33. And so the first 32 set of 32 digits is considered a group, 314 ... So we take this set of digits and then we add the digits up. And so we get 150. Trust me, you get 150. And we interpret that 150 as a wavelength in centimeters. And the note you hear is the note on the piano whose wavelength in centimeters is closest to 150. And that would be the A3. So that gives us the low note. That gives us A note. And so what are we going to do with these other two notes? How are we going to find harmonics, right? Well, so then we take half the digits. We take the first half of those 32 digits, so the first 16 digits, and we take the second half. And so we create two sums. So we have a sum of 80 and 75. We do the same process where we look for the note on the piano with the wavelength in centimeters closest to those numbers. And in this case, we get an A4 and an A sharp 4. And so we play those as the higher notes. They're higher because they're shorter wavelengths, because the sums are smaller because we add up smaller number of digits. So at that point, we play an A3, an A4, and an A sharp 4, and that hangs in space. In some cases, we cannot play the note because the sum is too small and the wavelength is too short and it's outside the range of the piano. And so that is a rest. Sometimes one of the sums is too small, so that is an unplayable note. So the highest note we play is the C8 on the piano, which is an 8 centimeter note. And the lowest note that we play is A sharp 2 with based on a sum of 60 digits, which adds up to 294. So you're actually hearing, literally the sums of digits in pi, because that is the frequency that you hear. So you're hearing a distance. Well, actually, all notes are distances in a way, right? We're hearing the wavelength of sound waves, but and where the notes are very high, that is when the zeros are quite dense in pi, and so the sums wind up being very small.
Did you ever get two zeros that were so far apart it made a note that was too low for the piano?
Excellent question, and no. So the lowest note on the piano is an A0, which is 1247 centimeters, and we were 1,000 off from that. So you would have to have quite a lot of digits. I think something like 600 digits, which is probably not likely, given that the longest stretch of digits between zeros we found was 60 digits. I mean, I guess if you went on forever, you would find such a sequence.
Yeah. Well, if pi is normal, you'll find an infinite number of blocks that are too long for the piano.
Of course. Well, it's a good question, because originally I had these elaborate ideas of, okay, well, we're going to look at the scan across the 62 trillion digits of pi and find the area where it has the densest zeros or the least dense zeros, and I did this, and after a while I thought, well, that seems a little bit too desperate, where does it matter that we play? Does it add to the story that we play a region of pi that has the densest zeros or the least zeros? Will people be really charmed by that? Or will people be charmed by the underlying musical ideas and the result? And the more I kind of deployed more technical solutions to the search for these regions in pi, the more I felt hollow, the more my emotions were sleeping and were not rejuvenated by this idea. And whenever I talked to Greg about the music, that's when my emotions became rejuvenated. So I've actually scaled back in the hunt for these areas, and that's why one of the tracks goes straight to the end, because really, where do we care about? We care about the beginning, we care about the end. We don't care about what happens in the middle that much.
The final track we'll discuss was named in honor of the great physicist Richard Feynman.
So Richard Feynman had this joke where he said it would be wonderful to memorize pi up to where 6 nines occur in a row, so that when you recited pi, you could finish with 999,999 and so on, which I think is a hilarious mathematic joke. So the Feynman point is in pi. It starts at digit, I believe, 762. You see 6 nines, which is reasonably early to see 6 nines in a row or 6 of any digit, and so that's the Feynman point. And it's appeared in my visualizations as a stop a couple of times. So I thought it would be really nice to, have a homage to Feynman, perhaps, make some Feynman chords or do something about the nines. Let's just do that.
So we've taken all of the digits up to the Feynman point, and every 9, we've taken that as an event, and then we've summed the digits between each 9. And I've used that number as the time signature.
So kind of like you did with Null, but using 9s instead of zeros.
Instead of zeros, exactly. Yeah. And we've applied it to the time signature instead of the wavelength of the sound.
And does the track end at the Feynman point, or?
And the track ends at the Feynman point. It also marks, I think there's 5 or 6 double 9s between the start and the Feynman point, and so we've marked those with kind of musical ideas as well. Yeah, and so there's various kind of, the music itself has a kind of jocular rhythmic nature to kind of reflect the nature of the joke that Feynman is making here. Hopefully that comes across.
Favourite. Which is your favourite of the 6, each of you? You have to pick one.
For me, it's the null, because I think the null is the truest representation of what pi is. The piece null just kind of exists in and of itself. It doesn't ask anything of you, doesn't expect anything of you. It just is. And for me, that's a good representation of the number.
I have to say 264 because of the technical achievement that it reflects and the human achievement in terms of the music composition. It brings together, I think, the two worlds. It brings unbelievable amount of compute power, things that were impossible 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And at the same time, it combines it with, a single individual's, Greg's musical essence that he has inside, which is absolutely unique. And that track is, it'll be my favorite no matter whether pi continues to be computed.
And look, I imagine Martin is going to be doing things with pi till the day he dies. But I've got a question for you, Greg.
Absolutely. Okay.
I've got a question for you, Greg. What about you? Is this the start of a whole new aspect to your music, like mathematics, or is this going to be just a one-time smash and grab collaboration and you're going to go back to the arty stuff?
Actually, I was thinking about this morning, and I was thinking, because we did have a limited time frame, we had about 5 weeks to kind of get this together. I would really like an extended period of time to kind of really sit down, nut out some ideas, compose them, get them performed.
The next Pi Day's only 1 year away.
Exactly.
Well, that's all for today's episode. To listen to the 314 album, find out lots more about it, check out the links in the notes for today's episode. Everything you need should be there. Our thanks to Greg and Martin for their time today. Also thanks to G Research and the Mathematical Sciences Research Institute for supporting the podcast. You can show your own support financially, perhaps by donating at patreon.com/numberphile. Every little bit helps there. But also just subscribing and listening to the shows makes us all very happy. So thanks for being here. I'm Brady Harron, and hopefully I'll be back in your podcast feeds very soon. Let's finish the show with a little bit more pie from the album.